Took Hollywood by storm. She's been dead now for almost 30 years. But even today, people still can't get enough of her. Today, we will hear some never-before-told secrets about Marilyn in an exclusive interview with the woman who shared her bedroom. And we're also going to meet Marilyn's first husband, who married her when she was just sweet 16. Don't go away. Marilyn Monroe was a Hollywood star whose role in real life was far more painful than any movie she starred in. She grew up in 12 different foster homes after her mentally ill mother abandoned her. She was sexually abused and used acting as an escape. But even acting didn't always help. Marilyn led a bittersweet life. She suffered the blues, whether she was alone or in a crowded room. She became so desperate at one point that she said, "Sometimes I wonder why I go on. I feel miserable. I hate it. It hurts so much. Death has got to be better than this." But with Marilyn's Hollywood highs and personal lows, this half-child, half-woman became the actress that the public worshipped and wanted to protect. Marilyn Monroe was one of those stars that we look to make wishes on. She's gone now, but her star will never fade. Today we're going to hear some of the most private and intimate details about Marilyn Monroe's life from some of her close friends and confidants. Our studio audience is filled with people who love Marilyn Monroe. In fact, some love her so much they make their living impersonating her. And later we're going to talk to actress Jane Russell, who starred with Marilyn in the unforgettable movie Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. She'll tell us what it was like to work with Marilyn at a time when Marilyn's career was just beginning to explode. We're also going to meet Marilyn's first husband, who fell in love with the 16-year-old Norma Jean Baker before she became Marilyn Monroe, the superstar. My first guest is a wonderful writer. She has authored a new book that's getting a lot of attention. We're very lucky, I think, to have the first talk show interview with her. The book is called Marilyn, Sisters, Rivals, and Friends. And in it are some really unbelievable secrets about Marilyn Monroe that have not been revealed before. The woman who wrote the book lived with her for 8 years. And I think this was probably during some of Marilyn's most turbulent times. She's an actress. You may recognize her from the Broadway show, The Diary of Anne Frank, movie Picnic. Her name is Susan Strasberg, and she's the daughter of the acclaimed acting guru Lee Strasberg. He trained some of the greats in Hollywood. Welcome, Susan, to the show. It is so nice to see you again. It really is. For people who were not part of that scene, they're going to say, well, how come Susan...
together and we'd be up all night, kind of, you know, the way... She seemed almost my age. She was 12 years older than me, but she was so simple and so kind of direct and childlike, except that she was a lot more fun than most of my friends because she was more sophisticated and she was much freer. None of my friends really would talk about sex, mostly because in 1954 we didn't know anything about sex. But she was just... She opened kind of all these doors and made things seem all right to talk about that with other people I would have felt guilty or dirty or wrong.
Girly things. Did she ever give you advice?
Yeah, she did. And she would tell me about men and say, listen, you know, women know much better than men. They think they know what we're thinking, but they don't. And you have to watch out because they all want to use you. And it's funny because before the women's movement, she seemed to wear the fact that, excuse me, most of the men in the audience, but that women really were more in touch with their feelings and more together. She kind of gave me advice. I was having an illicit, I was very young. I was having an affair with Richard Burton, who was married, and oh, it was horrible. I was ready to kill myself. And she gave me advice and said, listen, you know, you have to be prepared, you know, because men tend to use you, and I guess she was speaking personally. And she would give me advice on makeup and what to do and how to handle myself. But the strange thing was that there I was thinking that she was the American dream and wanting to be like her. And one day she turned to me and she says, oh, Susie, don't say that you want to be like me. I want to be like you. And I said, Marilyn, why? And she said, because people respect you.
And she always felt that people didn't respect her.
Yeah, and that's really all she wanted, was to be seen for who and what she really was. Marilyn, of all the stars that I know, particularly female ones, she didn't care about diamonds. It's funny, she sang Diamonds as a girl's best friend. She didn't care about diamonds. She didn't care about furs. She really cared about being accepted for who she really was, which is, I think, what we all want.
She, in Susan's book, there's wonderful moment of her in a dressing room, and I think she told you not to wear a bra or not to wear underwear.
I had this dress on, and she said, you can't wear underwear under that, because remember, we were wearing girdles. Some of us may still be wearing girdles, but I'll never tell. She took off all her clothes, and she was stark naked, and I thought the salesgirl was going to faint, and I was a little embarrassed. Of course, a week later, I went with a girlfriend to a department store and took off all my clothes, and I was stark naked.
See, it's catching.
I was really trying to
I love
imitate
the fact that you bought a copy of the Kama Sutra for
No,
people.
we didn't buy it. Do you know what the Kama Sutra is?
Yeah, it's that kind of oriental positions.
It's like, I don't know, 1,000 positions of lovemaking, and my mother had a copy of this somewhere in her books, and one day Marilyn was looking and saying, oh, I have this book, that book, and then she said, oh, your mother has the Kama Sutra. I've always wanted to see this. I was 16. And 16 in those days was a lot younger than 16 now, so she pulled out the book and she said, oh my God, I can't believe this. She said, the guys I've been with had no imagination. And then she said, let's try these positions, because I don't think anybody could get into them. And I said, well, I'm taking ballet, so I'm very flexible. I could do it, you know, trying to show off. So we got down on the floor, and then, wait a minute, who's going to be the man? And she said, well, I don't know. And I said, well, you're taller and older, so you have to be the man. So we were doing all these positions and kind of, you know, bumping heads and that. And afterwards she said, please don't tell your parents. I don't want them to think I'm a bad influence on you. But the thing that was interesting in retrospect was that I had the feeling that in spite of the fact she'd been with all these sophisticated or famous men, that Marilyn, like a lot of women, had been the one who had to do all the work. Yeah. You know?
How did you feel? Dad had just gotten a lot of fame, and she had a very special relationship with your father. Were you jealous? Did she get away with more than you got away with?
Yeah. Now I can see that it was normal, that it's always the kids who probably have to live up to certain standards, but at the time I didn't understand it, because I used to say, well, wait a minute, how can she be late? How can she get hysterical? How can she take pills? How can she do all these things that my father would murder me if I did?
And she suddenly comes in and she just kind of, you know, and she's the favorite one.
And it was, she was getting a kind of, it's unfair, I think it's just life. You know, you kind of have to accept it, because that. But in other words, it's at night sometimes I couldn't sleep and she couldn't sleep, so she'd come over, and in order not to have her take pills, my father said to me, well, you don't understand, I hold her because she needs to be held, and if I hold her, then she doesn't need pills. Of course, it was 3 in the morning and I was wandering around and not able to sleep, and he wasn't holding me, so I was jealous. One night I heard him singing to her, and I looked in and he was holding her, sitting on the edge of the bed holding her, and he was singing this lullaby that had been my lullaby, the song that he sang. Well, what about me? You know, I want it too. On the other hand, I think that my dad felt that he didn't want to encourage certain things in me, but I got to tell you, and I'm sure he had his reasons. In other words, maybe he, because I know he loved me, but he just was able to give her a certain kind of nurturing and attention and physical contact that he didn't give me. Although once I remember, years later, my dad said to me that he was brought up thinking that if you were a father and you were physical with your daughter.
Quote in the book, quote, it confused me to observe the attention and time my father devoted to Marilyn. Some level in love with her.
I think that in some level, he was in love with her talent.
Okay.
And also my father had a thing, just the way Marilyn, you know, would adopt like any strays, and she was for the underdog. My father also responded to people who were very needy. And Marilyn was one of the most vulnerable, needy people that we knew. We knew a lot of crazy artists, a lot of people who were addicted, but Marilyn had something that was a little more human than a lot of the other people. She was very much herself, very simple, so open and vulnerable. In a way, I guess she was like all of us, only more so. It was almost like she was this big mirror that was, let's say, if I were lonely or I lacked self-esteem, she had all of it, but it was on a much bigger scale. And we were all drama queens, too, so that made it even more.
Probably why she became that legend. Marilyn got the blues more than anyone, true?
True, more than anyone that I knew. She would get the blues, it was kind of the empty bed blues because she was alone, or then she'd get the blues because she was with the wrong person, or she'd get the blues because she didn't think she was any good, or she'd get the blues because she was afraid that she wasn't going to be any good. So that once, you know, we were talking about, you know, the voice in your head, the voice that just said, what voice? You know, that, that kind of negative critic voice that's always telling you what you can't do and that you're not good enough. I think it's a little man who sits up there and says, you're not good enough, you're not good enough. And we were talking about it, Marilyn said, gee, you only have one voice up there? I've got a committee.
Wow. What about the pearls you're wearing?
These pearls were Marilyn's that she got in Japan on her honeymoon with Joe DiMaggio. And what happened is she wore them during the divorce hearing, and then she never really wore them. And my mother had seen them and loved them. And one Christmas, the doorbell rang, and we opened the door, and there was nobody there, but there was this brown paper bag in front of the front door. And we picked it up, and it said Paula, and it had a heart on it. We opened it, and it was the pearls from Marilyn. And my mom, after Marilyn's death, but before my mom died, which was 4 years after Marilyn, my mother gave them to me. And so when I wear them, I feel that I have Marilyn's energy and my mother's energy with me, because pearls are alive, you know, they hold. I can't cry because I did not put on waterproof mascara today. I'll kill myself if I cry.
All right, I'll take a break, and you get you some Kleenex, and we can even fix up, even have a tube of mascara, because it's a high-budget show. When we come back, we'll meet the man who shared his bedroom with Marilyn Monroe whenever she'd stay the night, and we're going to talk to actress Jane Russell, who worked with Marilyn. One of her first pictures in Hollywood. Stay with us. This year is going to mark the 30th anniversary of Marilyn Monroe's death. I know what you're saying. Oh, my goodness, 30 years. In many ways, I guess, gone into the land of the icon. She's more famous today than she ever was. We've been talking with Susan Strasberg, who's written a book about her relationship with Marilyn Monroe. Joining us now is Susan's brother, John. John was, as he put it, in the full beginning stages of puberty when Marilyn Monroe joined their family. And when Marilyn would spend the night, as Susan said, guess whose bed she got? That's right, John's. Your sister says 12 or 13 at the time.
Mm-hmm. Probably, yeah. Well, I'm older than her now, but in those days, right. so she has a better memory of those moments. Yeah.
Late night conversations with Marilyn. Did she talk to you like she talked to Susan?
Well, I don't know that I would call them conversations. No, I don't think it was the same relationship at all, because I think that Susan's relationship was one which was a much more peer relationship.
Sure.
And mine wasn't. I had chosen and was more or less someone living on the outside of the family looking in, and I didn't particularly like most of what I saw going on. And when I tried to express that, I felt even more on the outside. And Marilyn was one of the few people whom I did not feel was different from me. In that sense, her humanity was something that always came through, whether she was suffering, whether she was acting, whether she was doing anything, which I think is part of why people are still fascinated by her and why she was also as the kind of star that she was, because it wasn't just, she's not just a star, she's become a myth. But at those moments when I would talk to her...
Did you think she was sexy? You were 12 or 13. Was this
no,
not your type, right?
No. I wondered about that for a long time.
Well, no, it's
no, and I also thought that I should lie about that for a while, because I thought, well, you know, a guy who says, well, Marilyn Monroe doesn't do it to me, there's something wrong with him. However, I've had a little more experience now, so I'm not worried about that.
But also, she was so close to us, it would have been almost like incest in a way.
No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't that. No, it was that I saw Marilyn. My first impression of her was that she's like me. There was something about her that was childlike, and was innocent. And that is probably the strongest reaction that I have, and I had it immediately. And that was not, I mean, that could also be something that could be sexual, or you could be in love with someone whom you also see as a child, but I never did. I just saw her kind of as a person.
Drugs.
You know?
There's a thing in Susan's book where, let's see if I have it somewhere here, she was crawling down on discovering Marilyn crawling down the hallway in the middle of the night, moving slowly, sluggishly on all fours. Her progress seemed interminable. She finally reached the door, raised her hand, and began to scratch on it like a puppy that's been locked. Lee, Lee, she whimpered. She toward her. The door opened. My father appeared. He was half asleep. He lifted her up and took her back to Johnny's room. I felt like a spy, an intruder in my own home. Did any of us know in those days that was drugs?
Yeah.
You did?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, I wouldn't.
I learned about
it. We knew that it was drugs, but you didn't think of it as addicts. In other words, today, you know, you'd say, go to Betty Ford. In those days,
it was, no,
wasn't talked about the way it is now.
Well, I think also drugs, I mean, nowadays when you talk about drugs, you're talking also about people who are shooting and snorting a variety of substances. And in those days, you were talking about people taking a lot of pills. And pills were normally something that were given to you by prescription by a doctor. So it was not considered the same way.
I was given pills when I was 17 years old in a Broadway show. I was given sleeping pills because I couldn't sleep 17. And Marilyn, as a matter of fact, said to me, if you puncture them, they work faster. So I started punching them to work faster, but we didn't know the damage they could do. We did, but you know, you weren't as aware in the 50s.
What about her mind? I have a quote. I don't know if that's true. You said, I think Marilyn was a sick woman, a classic schizophrenic.
Yeah, well, I'm speaking, I'm not a doctor. However, that definition to me comes from the work of Wilhelm Reich, who was basically the doctor who defined a character structure in classical analysis, and except that a lot of classical analysts will say that when he defined schizophrenics, he was crazy himself.
You disagree with your bro?
I disagree a little bit. I think that she, first of all, I don't know, there are different definitions of schizophrenia, although she did have that predisposition from her mother, who was schizophrenic, and also going back in the family. It wasn't just the mother. There was a brother, there was the grandfather, some kind of schizophrenia that comes from a venereal disease originally. So she really had genetically this kind of bad odds. But I also think that the fact that she was taking so much chemicals on top of it, that from the age of 18, on top of this sensitivity and this open quality, that she started taking the drugs and drinking, it made the whatever the
it could make it worse.
Made it so much worse that it made it.
But still, Marilyn, I think, lived her life for love. She would have done anything for love, and emotionally speaking, she was an infant. And that is part of the classical definition of schizophrenia.
But Johnny, a lot of us have done anything for love, and we weren't schizophrenic.
Someone who knew Marilyn during a different period of her life, when her career was just beginning to take off, was an actress who starred with Marilyn in an unforgettable film, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. This woman is a Hollywood legend herself. She has been on Broadway and in dozens of films. Would you please welcome Jane Russell? I'm so pleased. She came in white slacks and says, I don't know if I'm going to put on this skirt or not. And I said,
I do whatever the boss wants.
There you go, come on. Jane was already a show business veteran when you and Marilyn worked together in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, but it was one of her first big pictures, I think. What was it like to work with her? Was this lady on time? Was she punctual? Was she a pro? I know you are, but what was she like?
Well, I'd been working for a long time, and Marilyn didn't even have a dressing room on the 20th Century Fox lot. She'd already made Niagara, but she didn't have her own dressing room, which is insane. And she got her first dressing room when we did Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. And she was very sensitive, super sensitive. So she got her feelings hurt, you know, a lot. The guys around the studio are not exactly...
tactful.
No, not tactful. And she started being a little bit late. And Howard Hawks was the director, and Jack Cole was doing the dancing. And he really had a problem with the two of us.
I want to show people a clip that Jane may not have seen in a little while anyhow, from Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, because it mentions these people. We just happen to have it available. Take a look.
We're just two little girls from Little Rock. We lived on the wrong side of the track. But Little Rock or Square Rock, these gals must have their rock. Diamonds are a girl's best friend. Diamonds
Jane said they cut that number, but they left it in the titles. Only in Hollywood and only those days.
When I first met Marilyn, we were rehearsing the dancing, and neither one of us were dancers. And Jack Cole would be very tough on his own dancers, but he was the patience of Job with us. He was so dear and so sweet, and he would do it over and over until we were doing it, you know, without even thinking, because that was the only way we could do it.
You would think with high-powered women like that. I noticed you got top billing.
Well, I'd been around a long time. I'm a very old broad.
What was your nickname for Marilyn?
I called her Blondel.
Blondel?
Blondel.
You know, there's something that I say in the book that's something that Marilyn said about you, which I'm sure you know, but which I really liked, which Marilyn at one point said, well, gee, how nice Jane had been to her, and she said, you know, gee, Jane tried to convert me to religion, and I tried to convert her to Freud. But you know, the strange thing is that one of the things I feel that Marilyn was looking for all her life, and that would have helped her, was not religious, but some kind of spiritual center, something to hold on to. I think you have to have that in life.
And she never
I certainly wasn't trying to introduce her to religion, because I don't like religion.
Or spirit.
But it was the Lord.
Yes,
it was the Lord. And we had a group called the Hollywood Christian Group, and Connie Haynes and Rhonda Fleming, Donald O'Connor, a whole gang of us would meet in a home, and we asked different speakers. So after Marilyn and I were working for a while, I thought, well, maybe she would be interested. So one night she followed me out to Connie's house, and we had the to-do, and it was a very good speaker, and after, we just sat around half the time on the floor because there were never enough seats in anybody's house for this gang. And we did it because everybody that had come to Hollywood might feel peculiar going to church. They'd get stared at and that kind of thing.
Actually, that makes a lot of sense. So it is a Christian meeting.
It was a Christian meeting, very informal, and the next day she said, I don't think that's for me.
Okay.
You know, so I said, okay,
but you know what?
fine.
Had she had some kind of stability, whether it was an accepted religion or it was Freud or anything else that you wanted to...
At Christian Science when she was younger, her favorite aunt, Aunt Anna, had been a Christian Scientist in Maryland, up even towards the end of her life, before she went out, let's say, to do something where she was really nervous, she would often turn to someone and say, hold a good thought for me, which is knowing that's like a little prayer. And towards the end of her life, she started doing that again, asking people to hold a good thought for me. And sometimes I think, you know, you can say that her life was tragic and that she's dead, but you know what? Millions of people are still holding a good thought for her. And that's a lot more than can be said that for a lot of people who are still here in the body. That's pretty good.
We're going to meet a man next who married Marilyn Monroe when she was 16. She was known as Norma Jean Baker then, and we'll hear what he has to say when we come back.
It's very nice, but I'd rather it for me.
I said, what has Marilyn Monroe got that a million other women have and prefer not to show?
Wow. Well, we're going to find out in a minute. We're taking a look at the turbulent life of one of Hollywood's most loved legends, Marilyn Monroe. Even though Marilyn has been dead for almost 30 years now, we're hearing some things about her life, things that I didn't know. Susan Strasberg, whose father was acting guru Lee Strasberg, wrote a book about Marilyn. She's here today with her brother John. And we have actress Jane Russell, her own legend, who knew Marilyn at an earlier time in her life when the career was just getting started. I want you to meet the man who knew Marilyn before they did. In fact, before she was Marilyn. This is Jim Dougherty, who on June 19th, 1942, married a 16-year-old beauty named Norma Jean Baker. Jim was 21 at the time, and they were married for 4 years. I understand, Jim, that your first date with Norma Jean was arranged. You lived in the same neighborhood, and her mother asked you?
They had a Christmas party for the factory where Doc Goddard and Grace Goddard, which were the foster parents of Norma Jean. That factory had a Christmas party, and there was Bebe, who was Norma's foster sister, and Norma Jean needed dates. So I got a date for Bebe, and I took Norma Jean. And things kind of progressed after that. I took her to
We
movies.
don't hear... Was this a full sister, Susan? You did the research.
This was the, as he said, this was her family, the foster family.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because whatever happened to that sister?
There was, I think, there was a half-sister.
Half-sister.
Who, I don't know,
She's in
Bernice.
Florida.
Yeah, she's in Florida. And she,
That's
towards the
where-
end of her life, Marilyn felt this need to reconnect with family and called her and went to see her.
Now,
Norma Jean's mother went there. That's where she lived when she died.
But Mother really asked you to marry her, right?
No, what happened was Grace came to my mother
Right.
and said to my mother, we are moving to Virginia. Grace is speaking to my mother now.
Right.
That's the way it goes.
Grace was the foster mother.
Yeah, Greg Goddard is the foster mother. She says, we're moving to Virginia. We can't take Norma Jean with us. Why doesn't Jimmy marry Norma Jean? So I didn't know about this. I was going with a girl in Santa Barbara named Doris Brennan, who had been the queen of the Santa Barbara Festival, and I was going out with Norma Jean at the same time. So my mother asked me, she says, you know, why don't you marry her? Why would you like to marry her? And I said, sure. I'm going to go in the service. She won't have to go into an orphanage, and we'll get married. So then we started dating seriously for about 6 months.
Was she a good cook?
Oh, yeah. She only had one problem. That was the time that my brother took all the labels off of the canned goods. But she took it, you know, she was a real good person, and she just laughed, and we never knew what we was having for dinner. Every dinner was a surprise.
Now, you say that she didn't smoke or drink, and she worked hard around the house.
She was a good housekeeper, that's true, and she was a devoted housekeeper. Sometimes she'd get a little careless. She had a short and some wiring on the floor. We had some water come under the door, and to put... She'd get a little careless. She had a short and some wiring on the floor. We had some water come under the door, and to put the fire out, she threw water on it, and that didn't work too well. But she was a very neat person, and a very loving person.
She wanted to have a baby.
Yes, she asked me for a baby when I was going in the service. She said, I want a baby, I want a piece of you.
I have a letter. Is it all right if I read it? I would always ask.
Go ahead.
We already have one mascara running, so let's see if I can do this.
He's not wearing any. He can cry.
This is a letter from Marilyn to her foster mother about her marriage to Jim, dated June 15th, 1944. Dearest Grace, I've never really written and told you of Jimmy and my married life together. Of course, I know that if it hadn't been for you, we might not have been married, and I know I owe you a lot for that fact alone. I love Jimmy just more than anyone, and I know I shall never be happy with anyone else as long as I live, and I know he feels the same towards me. So you see, we're really very happy together. That is, when we can be together. We both miss each other terribly. We will be married 2 years, June 19th, and we really have had quite a happy life together. When the time came to get divorced, it was her decision. How did she explain this to you? What could she say that would make sense?
Well, really, to her, it wasn't like we were separating or anything. We just weren't going to be married anymore because we were going to live together anyhow.
But why would she want a divorce if you're going to live together anyhow?
Well, she had to be single to get a contract with whoever was offering a contract at the studio, and she wanted this contract.
What do you make out of what happened from that time on, in your own mind?
I think she went through something that she wasn't equipped to go through. She was a very kind, gentle person. And this is the toughest business in the world, being in the acting business. And you hear so many people that have tabloid minds, so to speak, saying things about her as to how she died. And I call it a tabloid mentality. And they never knew her. They knew nothing about her. Some of them have written books. Thank goodness Susan knew her, in which she wrote her book. Yeah. But I get so upset with some of these things that are said about her because she was a good person.
Yeah.
What happened in the end, do you think, Jim?
To her?
Mm-hmm. Couldn't cope?
No. This goes on. You know, I was a policeman for 25 years in Los Angeles, and I got to answer a lot of calls around the Universal Studios where things would occur where people have to get some sleep. So they take a sleeping pill. They gotta be up to go to work, so they take an upper. Then they take 2 downers, and then they take 3 uppers. Pretty soon they lose count of the downers. I walked into this house one day and I heard this lady saying to her son, "Bring me another pill, I gotta get some sleep." And the little kid was sharp, he was emptying them and giving her the empty capsules. But I came back the next day to talk to her to see if she was trying to commit suicide. She says, "No. I just wanted to get some sleep because I had to work the next day and I was so tired."
But Sally, you know, when Jim said something about, well, you know, the business, and it's true that it's the hardest business in the world, but I feel Marilyn felt, at least when I knew her, that she had something, she wanted to do something for the world. Mm-hmm. She felt she wanted that the reason God had put her here was that she was meant to give something, to share something with a lot of people. And I think that if she hadn't gone into the business, her life might have been worse, because if you look at Clara Bow, when Clara Bow quit the business, she wound up with 2 beautiful children, a lovely husband, and totally schizophrenic with a nurse for the rest of her life. No. Because for Marilyn, it was a chance to express all that hidden stuff that when she was growing up she had to hide. Her you know, the sorrow, the passion, the freedom, you know, her sexuality. She was different. She wasn't normal. She once said to me, they keep trying to put me in this box called normal, Susan, and you open the box and nobody lives in there anyway. Why are they doing that to me? She said, and they expect me to be the anything-goes girl, you know, the happy-go-lucky girl, and I need to find out who I am, so that I think that although the business is a killer, and it's a hard business, I somehow think, though, that it also gave Marilyn something that she wanted desperately.
I can tell that Jane wants to say something. When we come back...
She wanted it desperately.
Yeah. You have to. When we come back, we'll talk about the mysteries surrounding her. Maybe talk about her death. Our guests today have different opinions of what really happened. I'll ask you. Take a break. The year was 1962. Marilyn had sung Happy Birthday to the President and was working on a film she never finished called Something's Gotta Give. On August the 5th, she was found dead in her home from an apparent overdose of barbiturates. Tragic end to an already semi-tragic life. There have been a lot of theories about what really happened the night Marilyn died. Jane, I said we'd get back to you. Do you hold with conspiracies? John, do you hold with conspiracies?
I have no idea.
No, not at all.
Was it possible?
Anything
is possible, but you know what?
But not factual.
Nobody was under her bed that night, and nobody really knows. And the thing that bothers me is that people who didn't know, who come out and look for a fast way to exploit. Marilyn was exploited when she was alive, and she's exploited since she's been dead. So people suddenly come out, they don't know, they make up stories that nobody is alive to say, no, it's not true. So it's funny, it's
a lot easier to try to, if you talk about politics and say it's a political thing, then you don't have to think about how she felt. And I think that's what makes it's easier for people to deal with it, because then they don't have to say, well, why would somebody who made us all so happy,
was rich and
why
famous and
somebody
beautiful,
who has everything, someone who seems to have love, she's had men that a lot of women would say, but those are wonderful men, why is that person not happy? You know?
Besides Jim, present company, who did she really love?
Well,
I'll take a break and I'll let you think about it. Give me a moment. We'll be right back. I want to say something about Waif, if that's all right with you, before I get to the men in her life. Jane, your career goes on, and I know one of the things that you're passionate about is the nonprofit organization you founded that places orphan children with adoptive families. How's it going? We love you. We love Waif. We think you're doing wonderful things.
We're almost up to 40,000 children, but it could be 3 times more.
Now, who did she love?
I think, in a way, Marilyn's whole life was a love story. I know that the marriages ended and the affairs wound up disastrous, but I think it was a love story of a woman who had this capacity to love everybody except herself. And in the end, if you don't love yourself, none of the rest helps.
I feel like you do. I love Marilyn Monroe, and I really think she was exploited and she was used. But see, we only know what we read in the paper. Do you feel that she was used by the Kennedys at all? How do you feel about the Kennedys and Marilyn Monroe?
I can only speak from what I knew, and I was not privy to a lot of those things. We had just been talking about it in the break, and we said, listen, if she was used by the Kennedys, politicians use people. That's a major thing that they do. They use and discard people, and it's the nature of reality of politicians all over the world, not just in this country. So, yes, she was used by her studio, who wanted to keep her a dumb blonde because she was making money for them, and maybe she was used by a lot of the men. But you know, in the end, Marilyn really fought to take responsibility for her own life. So in that sense, she wasn't a victim. She was very strong on a certain level.
Maybe a player. Take a break. We'll be right back.
God help me.
What's it all about, Alfie? Having done all this study and learned all of that, what do you think? What do you feel?
About what?
About anything concerned with it. Did it change your view of show business? Did it
Yes.
contribute to your understanding of your father, your brother, your mother?
At the time, it didn't. But in writing Marilyn and Me, it was like opening doors, because I also saw, in the beginning with Marilyn, because she seemed so glamorous and different and older and more sophisticated, and I thought we were worlds apart, I realized how much alike she and I were. And not only that, that in spite of the fact that she had that glamorous outer image, that inside she was just like me. She had the same insecurities, the same fears, the same longings, the same dreams. And that, in a way, she talked about things and I feel that even in the things that maybe you would look at as negative about her life, even in the pitfalls that she fell into, in a way...
She was a bit of every one of us?
Yes, and in a way, she taught us a lesson at her own expense, because I believe that millions of people still learn
What was the lesson?
From both her mistakes and from her triumphs. I think the lesson is to follow your dreams no matter what, and to be yourself with everyone under all circumstances. And I also think the lesson is that you have to take responsibility for your own life.
Take a break. Thank all of my guests today. Susan Strasberg's book is called Marilyn and Me, Sisters, Rivals, and Friends. And by the way, it's really good. Jane and I loved it. Jane Russel is in the fashion business now. She has a new line of sweaters for the full-figured woman about to hit the department stores nationwide. And a very special thanks to our collectors who've given us all of this ephemera, and the fans and the impersonators in our audience today who provided many of the photos and the posters used in today's show. It strikes me that something that was different about Marilyn Monroe is that women really loved her. Thank you for sharing this with us.
Some members of our audience will receive, and a promotional fee has been provided by
Paul Mitchell Salon Hair Care. We're as good to the environment as we are.